The easiest person to laugh at is often the one carrying the heaviest burden, but sometimes that quiet person is the one who changes every life in the room. Aaron Miller tightened his grip on the small pink backpack hanging from his shoulder as the revolving doors of Ross Meridian Group welcomed him into one of the tallest office buildings in downtown Chicago. His Navy maintenance uniform had been washed so many times that the fabric had begun to fade, and the steel-toe work boots beneath his jeans carried the honest marks of years spent fixing problems that other people never noticed until something stopped working. Tucked inside the backpack was a handwritten note from his 8-year-old daughter, Hannah, reminding him not to forget her science project after work. He smiled for only a second before returning his attention to the emergency service request displayed on his phone. The headquarters had reported a critical electrical malfunction affecting several executive conference rooms. If the system failed completely before the afternoon presentation, millions of dollars in negotiations could be delayed. Aaron had solved problems like this for years, never expecting applause and never asking for recognition. To him, repairing what was broken had become more than a profession. It had become the quiet language through which he honored the promise he made after losing his wife. The promise that Hannah would always grow up believing her father would show up whenever someone needed help. As he crossed the marble lobby, conversation slowed. Expensive suits and polished shoes surrounded him from every direction. Employees carrying designer coffee cups barely looked at one another, yet many found time to glance at the maintenance worker walking across the polished floor with a little girl's backpack resting against his shoulder. A few whispered behind polite smiles. Aaron ignored every word. His focus remained on the equipment waiting several floors above. Before he could reach the security desk, a confident voice echoed through the spacious lobby. "Well, this must be our emergency expert." Grant Whitmore, the company's operations director, stepped forward with several department managers beside him. His tailored charcoal suit looked flawless, and his smile carried the sharp confidence of a man accustomed to being the loudest voice in every room. He slowly looked Aaron up and down before glancing toward the pink backpack. Interesting choice of briefcase. Several nearby employees laughed quietly. Aaron remained calm. "I am here for the electrical service request." Grant folded his arms. "Of course you are. I suppose excellence really does come in unexpected packaging." More laughter spread across the lobby. One manager shook his head, while another whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Maybe next time they can send someone who actually looks professional." Aaron did not answer. Years of raising Hannah alone had taught him that not every insult deserved a response. Some moments required strength that made no sound at all. As Grant casually stepped aside, the edge of his polished shoe brushed against Hannah's backpack, knocking it onto the marble floor. Colored pencils rolled from the open zipper beside a folded science project and a family photograph of Aaron and Hannah smiling together at a neighborhood park. The laughter grew slightly louder. Aaron quietly knelt, carefully gathered every pencil, gently smoothed the bent corner of his daughter's drawing, and wiped away a faint mark from the backpack before standing again. His voice remained steady, respectful, and almost gentle. "A grown man can carry disrespect if he has to," he said. "A child's dreams should never have to." The laughter disappeared so completely that the enormous lobby seemed to forget how to breathe. Unknown to everyone standing below, behind the glass railing of the executive mezzanine, Chief Executive Officer Madeline Ross had witnessed every second without saying a single word. Madeline Ross remained motionless behind the glass railing overlooking the magnificent lobby long after the laughter had disappeared. From her position above, she had attended countless meetings where executives spoke confidently about leadership, integrity, and company values. Yet the quiet maintenance technician below had demonstrated more character in 30 seconds than many accomplished during entire careers. She watched Aaron Miller carefully place every colored pencil back inside the little pink backpack before gently slipping the family photograph into the front pocket as though it were the most valuable possession he owned. He never looked angry. He never demanded an apology. Instead, he simply adjusted the worn shoulder strap and calmly approached the security desk to sign the maintenance log. Madeline quietly turned toward her executive assistant. "Who is he?" The assistant immediately checked the visitor schedule. "Aaron Miller, independent facilities technician contracted through Midwestern Building Services. He has responded to several emergency service calls for us over the past 3 years." Madeline continued watching him. Has anyone ever complained about his work? The assistant looked surprised. Actually, no. His reports are always excellent. Before another question could be asked, an urgent voice echoed through the executive communication system. One of the conference centers on the 32nd floor had completely lost electrical power only 45 minutes before an important investor presentation. Grant Whitmore immediately stepped forward with visible frustration. Send him upstairs, he ordered impatiently. If he really is the expert everyone claims he is, let us see him earn today's invoice. Aaron simply nodded after receiving the work order. He entered the service elevator carrying his toolbox in one hand and Hannah's backpack in the other. As the elevator climbed higher through the building, he quietly removed the folded note from inside the backpack. Hannah's careful handwriting made him smile again. Good luck today, Daddy. You always fix things because you never give up. He carefully placed the note back inside before the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. The atmosphere could not have been more different from the peaceful neighborhood where he lived. Executives hurried through polished hallways speaking into wireless headsets while assistants rushed between conference rooms carrying presentation folders. Aaron politely greeted everyone who crossed his path, even those who barely acknowledged his presence. Inside the disabled conference room, several information technology specialists had already examined the equipment without finding the cause of the failure. Grant entered moments later, followed by department managers who watched Aaron with open skepticism. You have 30 minutes, Grant said. Our investors are not interested in excuses. Aaron quietly set down his toolbox and carefully examined the electrical panels without responding to the pressure surrounding him. Every movement reflected years of experience rather than urgency. He listened to the faint rhythm of the backup relays, studied the diagnostic indicators, and checked each connection one by one. Meanwhile, Madeline observed everything through the conference room's glass wall without announcing her presence. She noticed something everyone else overlooked. While the executives grew increasingly impatient, Aaron never hurried. He respected the problem enough to solve it correctly instead of quickly. After several silent minutes, Aaron looked toward one section of the control cabinet before gently pressing a reset sequence that no one else had attempted. Several indicator lights immediately returned to green. The conference room monitors illuminated one after another as the ventilation system quietly restarted. A collective breath of relief spread across the room. Aaron closed the control panel and calmly wrote several notes inside the maintenance report. The immediate problem has been resolved, he said respectfully. However, the system recorded multiple warning alerts last Tuesday. Someone should review those records before the same issue returns. Grant accepted the report with little interest, believing the crisis had simply ended. Madeline, however, memorized every word because she had learned long ago that quiet professionals rarely offered warnings without good reason, and something inside her told her that Aaron Miller had just revealed the beginning of a much larger story. When Aaron Miller finished documenting the repair, he quietly closed his toolbox and prepared to leave the executive floor without expecting anyone to remember his name. That had always been the rhythm of his work. He arrived when something was broken, solved the problem, completed the paperwork, and disappeared before the celebration began. As he stepped toward the service elevator, a calm voice stopped him. Mr. Miller. Aaron turned and found Madeline Ross standing only a few feet away. She no longer looked like a distant executive behind a glass wall. She looked directly into his eyes with quiet curiosity. Thank you for responding so quickly today. Aaron nodded politely. I was only doing my job. Madeline noticed the small pink backpack still resting on his shoulder. Your daughter? Aaron smiled for the first time since entering the building. Yes, Hannah. She has an after-school science fair this afternoon. I promised I would not be late. Madeline glanced at the backpack before looking back at him. You carry it with you? Aaron answered without embarrassment. She forgot it in my truck this morning. She would be disappointed if I showed up without it. Before Madeline could respond, Grant Whitmore walked into the hallway with several senior managers following behind him. The investors are arriving, he announced loudly. Everything is finally working. He looked briefly toward Aaron before adding with a dismissive smile. I suppose even beginners get lucky once in a while. Several managers chuckled politely, eager to agree with their superior. Aaron simply thanked the receptionist for her assistance and continued walking toward the elevator. Madeline watched him leave without defending himself yet again. Something about that silence stayed with her. It was not weakness. It was discipline. After the investor presentation concluded successfully, Madeline returned to her office instead of celebrating. She opened the maintenance report Aaron had submitted only an hour earlier. His handwriting was clear, precise, and remarkably detailed. At the bottom of the report, he had included a recommendation that the company immediately inspect archived warning logs generated the previous Tuesday. Most executives would have ignored the final paragraph. Madeline did not. She called the Director of Information Systems. Please retrieve every diagnostic report from last Tuesday related to Conference Center 4. Less than 20 minutes later, the reports appeared on her screen. As she carefully reviewed the records, her expression slowly changed. Aaron had been correct. Multiple system warnings had been automatically generated days before the failure. Every alert had been acknowledged electronically but never investigated. The approval signature belonged to Grant Whitmore. Madeline leaned back in silence. If the electrical failure had occurred during the investor presentation instead of beforehand, the company could have suffered enormous financial damage along with lasting reputational harm. Aaron had not only repaired the immediate problem, he had quietly uncovered evidence that someone in senior leadership had ignored repeated warnings. Meanwhile, several miles away, Aaron arrived at Hannah's elementary school just as students began leaving their classrooms. Hannah spotted him immediately, smiling the moment she saw the familiar pink backpack hanging from his shoulder. "You remembered." Aaron handed it to her gently. "I always will." Hannah proudly showed him her science project before slipping her small hand into his. As they walked toward the parking lot together, she looked up with innocent curiosity. "Did work go better today?" Aaron smiled softly. "Some people were kind. Some people were not. But we still finished what we came to do." Hannah nodded thoughtfully. "Grandma always says people show who they are when something goes wrong." Aaron looked at his daughter with quiet admiration. She was right. Neither of them realized that at the exact same moment, inside the highest office of Ross Meridian Group, Madeline Ross had already instructed her executive assistant to arrange a private meeting the following morning with the quiet maintenance technician whose character had begun revealing truths far beyond a simple electrical repair. The following morning, Aaron Miller returned to Ross Meridian Group expecting nothing more than another routine maintenance assignment. He parked his aging pickup truck beneath the employee garage, carefully placed Hannah's lunchbox on the passenger seat for her afternoon pickup, and walked toward the towering glass building carrying the same worn toolbox that had followed him through countless repair jobs. Before he reached the service entrance, his phone vibrated. The message came directly from the executive office. Chief Executive Officer Madeline Ross requested a private meeting at 9 o'clock. Aaron read the message twice, convinced there had been some mistake. Independent maintenance technicians were never invited to the executive floor unless something had gone terribly wrong. He quietly took the elevator upstairs, wondering what awaited him. Inside her office, Madeline welcomed him with a sincere smile instead of the formal distance he expected. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Miller." Aaron nodded respectfully. "You asked to see me." Madeline gestured toward a chair overlooking the Chicago skyline. "Please sit." Aaron hesitated before taking the seat. His toolbox remained beside his feet. Madeline placed several printed reports on the conference table between them. "Yesterday you mentioned warning logs from last Tuesday." Aaron immediately recognized the documents. "Yes, you were correct." She folded her hands thoughtfully. Those warnings were acknowledged but never investigated. Aaron remained silent. "Did you already know who approved them?" He shook his head gently. "No, I only knew the system had tried to warn someone." Madeline admired the absence of accusation in his answer. He had focused on solving the problem instead of blaming people. Before either of them could continue, the office door opened unexpectedly. Grant Whitmore entered carrying presentation folders. Unaware Aaron was already inside. His confident expression faded for only a brief moment before returning. "I did not realize we were entertaining contractors this morning," Madeline calmly replied. "Mr. Miller is here because his maintenance report identified information we needed to review." Grant forced a polite smile. "Surely one repair report is not worth executive attention." Madeline slowly turned the printed diagnostic logs toward him. "These are the alerts you approved last Tuesday." Grant glanced at the pages without answering immediately. There were dozens of notifications that day. "We cannot investigate every minor warning." Aaron quietly spoke for the first time. Those alerts were not minor. They indicated progressive relay instability. Left unresolved, they almost always lead to complete system failure. Grant looked directly at Aaron with visible irritation. Since when does a maintenance contractor lecture executive leadership? Aaron met his gaze calmly. I am only explaining the equipment. The room fell silent. Madeline watched both men carefully. One defended his position with authority. The other defended facts with quiet confidence. She already knew which kind of leadership deserved trust. Grant attempted to change the subject. The investors never experienced an interruption. Everything worked out. Aaron answered respectfully, only because the failure happened before they arrived. Madeline slowly stood and walked toward the panoramic windows overlooking the city. Yesterday morning, I watched a father protect his daughter's backpack after being laughed at in our lobby. Yesterday afternoon, I watched that same man prevent a failure that could have embarrassed this entire company. Those two moments tell me far more about character than any executive performance review ever could. Neither man interrupted her. She turned back toward the conference table. This afternoon, we have a full operational review with the executive board. Mr. Miller, I would like you to attend. Aaron looked genuinely surprised. I am only the technician who repaired the system. Madeline smiled quietly. Sometimes the person closest to the work is also the person closest to the truth. Across the room, Grant realized the meeting he had expected to control was about to become something entirely different, and for the first time since mocking the quiet single father in the lobby, uncertainty replaced confidence behind his carefully practiced smile. That afternoon, the executive boardroom overlooked the Chicago skyline beneath a gray autumn sky, its walls of glass reflecting the city while silence settled over the long conference table. Department heads, legal advisors, financial officers, and senior executives took their seats one by one, expecting another routine operational review. Instead, they found Aaron Miller sitting quietly near the end of the table beside his worn toolbox. His Navy maintenance uniform looked almost out of place among tailored suits, yet his calm posture carried a confidence that required no expensive clothing. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances, while Grant Whitmore forced a polite smile that barely concealed his irritation. I hope we are not turning technical maintenance into executive strategy, he remarked lightly, drawing restrained laughter from a few loyal managers. Aaron simply folded his hands together and waited. Madeline Ross entered the room exactly on time, greeting everyone with her usual professionalism before taking her place at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming, she began. Today's discussion concerns yesterday's electrical failure, our operational procedures, and how we respond when warning systems identify preventable risks. A large display illuminated behind her, showing detailed diagnostic reports from the previous week. Grant confidently stood first, presenting polished slides describing the incident as an isolated equipment malfunction that had been resolved quickly without meaningful consequence. He concluded with reassuring confidence. Our response demonstrated operational excellence, and no further action is necessary. Several directors nodded in agreement. Madeline remained expressionless before quietly turning toward Aaron. Mr. Miller, would you please explain your findings? Every eye shifted toward the maintenance technician. Aaron stood calmly, carrying only a printed maintenance report rather than a presentation. Thank you, he said respectfully. Yesterday's failure did not begin yesterday. The equipment attempted to warn the building multiple times over several days. He placed enlarged diagnostic charts onto the conference table. These yellow indicators show relay instability beginning last Tuesday morning. Each automatic alert recommended immediate inspection. He pointed toward the approval records displayed on the screen. Every notification was acknowledged electronically, but no physical inspection followed. One board member leaned forward. Can you explain why that matters? Aaron nodded. Electrical systems rarely fail without warning. They communicate through small changes long before complete shutdown occurs. Ignoring those early signals allows minor problems to become expensive emergencies. His explanation remained simple enough for every executive to understand without diminishing the technical truth. The room listened with complete attention. Grant suddenly interrupted. With respect, maintenance personnel often exaggerate potential risks because they naturally prefer additional inspections. Aaron never looked offended. Preventive maintenance costs far less than emergency recovery, he answered quietly. That principle protects both equipment and people. Madeline asked another question. If yesterday's failure had occurred during the investor presentation instead of beforehand, what would likely have happened? Aaron answered honestly. The conference systems, environmental controls, and presentation displays could have shut down simultaneously. Recovery would have required significant time, creating unnecessary disruption during an important meeting. The boardroom became noticeably quieter. No dramatic language had been used. No accusations had been made. Facts alone had changed the atmosphere. Madeline then displayed the approval history on the large screen. Grant Whitmore's electronic authorization appeared beside each ignored warning. Several directors slowly exchanged concerned looks. Grant attempted one final defense. My department receives hundreds of automated notices every week. It is impossible to investigate every single one. Aaron responded with the same calm voice that had never once risen above conversation. You are correct. Not every notification deserves immediate action. These did. The system identified them as critical priority alerts. Silence settled across the room once again. The executives no longer saw a maintenance contractor sitting among them. They saw the one professional who had quietly protected the company while asking for neither recognition nor reward. And Madeline realized the moment she had been waiting for had finally arrived. The silence inside the executive boardroom grew heavier than any argument could have made it. No one rushed to defend Grant Whitmore anymore. The diagnostic records displayed across the large screen spoke with a clarity that required no dramatic interpretation. Every warning had been generated. Every warning had been acknowledged. Every warning had been ignored. Aaron Miller quietly returned to his seat, believing his responsibility had ended with telling the truth. He had never entered the meeting hoping to expose anyone. He had simply answered the questions placed before him. Madeline Ross slowly stood and looked around the room, allowing the silence to settle before speaking. Leadership is not measured by how confidently someone speaks after a crisis, she said calmly. Leadership is measured by what someone chooses to do before the crisis ever happens. Her words carried through the room with quiet authority. Several board members lowered their eyes toward the reports resting before them. One senior director finally broke the silence. Mr. Miller, may I ask you something? Aaron nodded respectfully. Of course. When you discovered yesterday's problem, why did you not immediately report Mr. Whitmore by name? Aaron answered without hesitation. Because my responsibility was to repair the system, not embarrass another person. I believe the records would speak for themselves if someone chose to read them carefully. The board members exchanged thoughtful glances. That answer carried more weight than any technical explanation he had offered all afternoon. Grant suddenly leaned forward, his confidence beginning to fade. This entire discussion is becoming personal, he insisted. We are allowing one outside contractor to question executive judgment. Madeline calmly turned toward him. No, Mr. Whitmore. The records questioned executive judgment. Mr. Miller simply noticed what everyone else overlooked. She picked up Aaron's maintenance report from the table and held it in her hands. Yesterday, this document prevented a preventable failure. Had these recommendations been ignored one more time, this company could have faced serious operational and reputational consequences. A member of the audit committee quietly adjusted his glasses before speaking. I have reviewed the documentation. The maintenance report is technically accurate. Another director nodded. So have I. One by one, additional voices reached the same conclusion until the room gradually formed an unexpected consensus. Aaron remained completely silent throughout the discussion. He neither celebrated nor appeared satisfied. His attention briefly shifted toward the small family photograph still tucked safely inside Hannah's backpack resting beside his chair. He remembered promising his daughter that morning that people should never become bitter simply because others failed to treat them fairly. He intended to keep that promise regardless of what happened next. Madeline noticed the quiet glance toward the backpack and understood something profound. Even in the most important meeting of his career, Aaron carried a reminder of the person who mattered most. She turned toward the board with calm determination. Yesterday morning, many people in this building laughed at Mr. Miller before they knew anything about him. They saw an old uniform, worn work boots, and a little girl's backpack. They assumed they understood his value. Her voice remained gentle but unmistakably firm. Yesterday afternoon, the same man protected this company without asking for recognition. Today he protected the truth without attacking anyone. Character like that cannot be purchased, promoted, or manufactured. It must already exist. Complete silence filled the room. Even Grant lowered his eyes. Madeline looked directly toward Aaron before speaking the words that would quietly change everything. The man some people mocked in our lobby is the very man who reminded this company what integrity actually looks like. No applause followed. None was needed. The boardroom simply fell into a respectful silence unlike anything Aaron had experienced before, because for the first time since walking through the front doors of Ross Meridian Group, every person in the room finally saw him exactly as he had always been. The meeting ended without celebration, yet everyone leaving the executive boardroom understood they had witnessed something far more meaningful than another corporate decision. Conversations that usually filled the hallway had been replaced by thoughtful silence. Aaron Miller quietly picked up his toolbox, lifted Hannah's pink backpack onto his shoulder, and prepared to return to the maintenance entrance exactly as he had arrived. Recognition had never been his destination. Honest work always had been. Before he reached the elevator, Madeline Ross stepped into the hallway behind him. "Mr. Miller." Aaron stopped and turned respectfully. "Yes, ma'am." Madeline smiled gently. "Would you walk with me for a few minutes?" Together they crossed the executive floor overlooking the Chicago skyline. Employees passing through the corridors instinctively stepped aside, many lowering their eyes with visible embarrassment after remembering the previous day's laughter in the lobby. Aaron noticed their discomfort, but greeted each person with the same quiet courtesy he had shown before. He carried no resentment, because resentment had never repaired anything. Inside a smaller conference room overlooking the river, Madeline closed the door before placing a single folder on the table. "I have spent the last 24 hours reviewing your work history," she said calmly. Aaron looked surprised. "My work history?" She nodded. "Every emergency repair completed for this company during the past 3 years. Every supervisor evaluation. Every contractor recommendation. Every after-hours service request." She slowly opened the folder. "There has never been a complaint about your professionalism. Instead, I found dozens of letters praising your honesty, your patience, and your willingness to stay until every problem was fully resolved." Aaron lowered his eyes modestly. "I simply try to finish the job correctly." Madeline smiled. "That is exactly why we need you." She slid a formal document across the table. "I would like to offer you the position of Director of Facilities Integrity. You would oversee preventive maintenance standards across every Ross Meridian property in the country." Aaron stared quietly at the proposal without touching it. The salary alone exceeded anything he had imagined earning. Full medical coverage, educational support for Hannah, retirement benefits, and leadership authority were listed clearly across the final pages. After several long moments, Aaron gently closed the folder instead of signing it. Madeline looked at him with mild surprise. "Is something wrong?" Aaron answered honestly. "The opportunity is generous." "Then why hesitate?" He looked toward the city beyond the windows before speaking. "Yesterday people laughed at me because of my uniform. Tomorrow they may shake my hand because of this title. Neither reaction changes who I am." Madeline listened carefully. Aaron continued. "If I accept this position while the maintenance teams across this company continue being treated as invisible, then I have only improved my own life. That is not the lesson I want my daughter to learn." Silence settled gently between them. "I would gladly serve this company," Aaron said, "but only if respect becomes part of the culture, not just part of my contract. Every custodian, electrician, cleaner, mechanic, security officer, and technician deserves to know their work matters before something breaks, not after." Madeline remained completely still. No consultant had ever presented leadership quite like this. She slowly smiled with genuine admiration. "Mr. Miller," she said softly, "that may be the most valuable business proposal anyone has ever placed before me." Aaron simply nodded. "It is not business." He glanced toward Hannah's backpack resting beside his toolbox. "It is the kind of workplace I hope my daughter grows up believing should exist." Madeline extended her hand across the table. "Then let us build it together." Aaron accepted the handshake with quiet dignity, unaware that the agreement reached in that small conference room would soon reshape not only the future of Ross Meridian Group, but also the lives of thousands of employees who had spent years waiting for someone to finally see their worth. The changes inside Ross Meridian Group did not happen through speeches or expensive campaigns. They began with small decisions repeated every day until respect became part of the building itself. Within weeks, maintenance employees were invited to operational planning meetings for the first time. Custodians received direct recognition for preventing costly problems before they occurred. Security officers were encouraged to report concerns without fear of being ignored. The company introduced a simple principle that appeared in every department. Every role deserves respect because every role protects someone else's success. Aaron Miller accepted his new position with the same quiet humility he had shown while carrying a toolbox through the service entrance. Although his office overlooked part of the Chicago skyline, he rarely spent long behind a desk. Most mornings he walked through mechanical rooms, loading docks, maintenance corridors, and utility spaces, greeting every employee by name whenever possible. People quickly realized that his title had changed, but his character had not. One afternoon, Madeline Ross found Aaron helping a young technician replace damaged wiring inside an equipment room. He was wearing protective gloves instead of a tailored jacket, patiently explaining each step without making the new employee feel embarrassed for asking questions. When the repair was complete, the technician smiled with visible relief. "Thank you for treating me like I belonged here." Aaron simply answered, "You already did." Sometimes people only need someone to remind them. Madeline quietly watched from the doorway without interrupting. She had spent years believing leadership meant making the hardest decisions. Aaron had shown her that leadership often meant helping someone believe they mattered before asking them to perform at their best. Later that evening, Aaron drove directly from work to Hannah's elementary school for the annual Family Science exhibition. Children proudly stood beside colorful displays while parents filled the gymnasium with excited conversation. Hannah spotted her father immediately and ran toward him with a bright smile before noticing Madeline walking beside him. "You came too." Madeline laughed softly. "Your father said this was the most important meeting on today's schedule." Hannah proudly led them to her display table. Her project was titled Building Strong Bridges. Using wooden craft sticks, she had created a carefully balanced bridge stretching between two paper hills. At the center stood three small painted figures holding hands. One represented a father, one represented a businesswoman, and one represented a little girl. Her teacher smiled warmly as they approached. Hannah explained that bridges are strongest when both sides support each other. Hannah looked up at the two adults she admired most. "People are like bridges too." Aaron knelt beside her. "What do you mean?" She pointed toward the model with complete sincerity. "You helped each other cross places that were lonely." Neither adult expected such wisdom from an 8-year-old. Madeline felt unexpected emotion rise behind her calm smile. Throughout all her years leading a billion-dollar company, countless consultants had spoken about teamwork, strategy, and culture. Yet a little girl had summarized everything in one simple sentence. After the exhibition ended, the three of them walked slowly toward the parking lot beneath a sky painted with the colors of sunset. Hannah reached for Aaron's hand first, then quietly slipped her other hand into Madeline's. Neither adult moved away. They simply continued walking together. Watching them from a distance, Hannah's teacher smiled quietly, believing she was witnessing an ordinary family at the end of a successful school day. None of them realized how extraordinary the journey had truly been. The greatest transformation had never been a promotion, a policy change, or a public apology. It had been the quiet decision of three people